Number 1.
I'm a 19-year-old guy living in the suburbs of upstate New York. Halloween is anything except my favorite holiday. I can't stand anything horror related, especially those horror narrators on YouTube. When I was younger, my parents split up on Halloween, and to be perfectly honest, it's ruined it for me. I remember that night so vividly. My mother woke me up in the middle of the night, packed up a few things, and we left. We originally lived in Massachusetts, so we live in New York now. I don't look forward to receiving mountains of candy or participating in some harmless vandalism that's associated with the moronic holiday. I just can't even get my mind away from the memories of my parents splitting up and thinking it was all my fault. It can be such a horrible thing to feel. The only good that came of my parents' breakup was that my mother and I had become a lot closer than before. My dad was pretty much out of the picture at that point. I haven't seen him since then, and to be honest, I didn't really care for him. He was always drunk, and I have a vague memory of him screaming at Mom. It was Halloween night, around 8 p.m. I decided to play some Minecraft on the Xbox 360. About 20 minutes into building a giant submarine, I heard something outside of my window. We lived in an out-of-the-way house in a dark back road, so we normally didn't get a lot of trick-or-treaters. I opened the window and peeped my head out to look around. There wasn't anything out of the normal. I figured it was just a raccoon or something. I continued my game for 20 more minutes until I heard my mom call me for dinner. I got up and walked down the long hallway, but I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, on the outside of the window. It looked to be a teenager wearing some stupid Halloween mask. I yelled in as deep a voice as I could muster. When I got to the kitchen, my mom seemed a bit uneasy. She said that she was scared and didn't feel safe. I tried comforting her and told her that it was just the eerie mood set in place from Halloween. I was halfway through telling her how I managed to get out of a speeding ticket on the way to work when we heard shuffling come from the outside of the door. She assumed it was trick-or-treaters. She grabbed some candy and went to open the door. My back was to the door, but I turned around as quickly as humanly possible when I saw a large man driving a large machete into my mom's shoulder. She screamed in terror and leaked blood everywhere. I grabbed a kitchen knife and ran toward the man. He just stood there and let me attack him. I couldn't figure out why he didn't try hitting me or even running, but I wasn't going to let him get away with hurting my mom like that. I jabbed the knife upward into his gut and twisted. I could feel how much stronger the adrenaline made me when I dragged the knife down, splitting the skin covering his stomach. He fell to the floor, obviously lifeless at this point. I checked my mother to see if she had a pulse, but she'd lost so much blood. It was far too late for her. I walked over to the attacker and got on my knees. When I removed the mask, I was met with a horrible shock. It was my own father.
Number 2.
The old storage sheds along the tracks were abandoned shortly after the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was built, and it wasn't long before the poor folk of the area moved in. The sheds provided shelter, of a sort, although the October wind still pierced through every crevice, and the small fireplaces that the poor constructed did little to keep the cold at bay. A gentle, kindly woman named Jenny lived alone in one of the smaller sheds. She had fallen on hard times, and with no family to protect her, she was forced to find work where she could and take whatever shelter was available to someone with little money. Jenny never had enough to eat, and in October her tiny fire barely kept her alive during the cold months. Still, she kept her spirits up and tried to help other folks when they took sick or needed food, sometimes going without herself so that another could eat. One cold evening in late autumn, Jenny sat shivering over her fire, drinking broth out of a wooden bowl, when a spark flew from the fire and lit her skirt on fire. Intent on filling her aching stomach, Jenny did not notice her flaming clothes until the fire had burned through the heavy wool of her skirt and began to scorch her skin. Leaping in terror, Jenny threw her broth over the leaking flames, but the fluid did nothing to douse the fire. In terror, Jenny fled from the shack and ran along the tracks, screaming for help as the flames engulfed her body. The station was not far away, and instinctively Jenny made for it, hoping to find someone to aid her. Within moments, her body was a glowing inferno, and Jenny was overwhelmed by pain. Her screams grew more horrible as her steps slowed. She staggered blindly onto the tracks just west of the station, a ball of fire that barely looked human. In her agony, she did not see the glowing headlight of the train rounding the curve, or hear the screech of the brakes as the engineer spotted her fire-eaten figure and tried to stop. A moment later, her terrible screams broke off as the train mowed her down. Alerted by the whistle, the crew from the station came running as the engineer halted the train and ran back down the tracks toward poor dead Jenny, who was still burning. The men doused the fire and carried her body back to the station. She was given a pauper's funeral and buried in an unmarked grave in the local churchyard. Within a few days, another poverty-stricken family had moved into her shack, and Jenny was forgotten. Forgotten, that is, until a month later, when a train rounding the bend west of the station was confronted by a screaming ball of fire. Too late to stop, the engineer plowed over the glowing figure before he could bring the train to a screeching halt. Leaping from the engine, he ran back down the tracks to search for a mangled, burning body, but there was nothing there. Shaken, he brought his train into the station and reported the incident to the station master. After hearing his tale, the station master remembered poor dead Jenny and realized that her ghost had returned to haunt the tracks where she had died. To this day, the phantom of screaming Jenny still appears on the tracks on the anniversary of the day she died. Many an engineer has rounded the curve just west of the station and found himself face to face with the burning ghost of screaming Jenny, as once more she makes her deadly run towards the Harper's Ferry station, seeking in vain for someone to save her. This happened a couple years ago. I was 17 at the time, and I spent the majority of my time gaming. I always watched people do Let's Plays on YouTube, and I always wanted to do them myself, but I could never afford the equipment, and my family was far from rich. So I just made do by playing games. A lot of the time I would just talk while I was playing and pretend I was making a video. I know I'm a nerd. But after years of use, my PS3 finally broke on me. I spent all my time gaming on that thing, so for a few days I had no idea what to do. I eventually found myself browsing the internet for free entertainment. That was when I stumbled upon a few videos talking about the deep web. Originally, I had absolutely no interest in it. But then I started hearing the horror stories about it, and I felt like I had to check it out for myself. It took me a while to figure out how to work Tor, but I eventually found out how to get on and spent an entire night looking at shit. I read about crazy science experiments, learned a bit about encrypting, and I even found some decent porno. The deep web was nothing like I imagined it to be. I pictured all these evil people torturing children and selling drugs, but I didn't really see anything like that. I eventually found myself in one of those live video feeds with a cam girl. I typed in the chat box for her to take her top off. A few seconds went by with her just staring into the screen, and my screen went black. It was so sudden and abrupt, it really startled me. Then some plain white text appeared on my screen reading, "You shouldn't have done that." I replied, "Why are you doing this?" After a minute or so, the apparent hacker replied to my question with a picture. It was a picture of my house. I could tell it was taken from Google Maps, but I couldn't figure out how the hell he got my address. I started getting really freaked out at this point and tried shutting down the computer, but it wouldn't shut off. "I'm coming to get you," then appeared on the screen in big red text, and I could feel my heart pumping through my shirt. It dawned on me to unplug the computer, but by then the damage was done. I knew my parents wouldn't be home for a few hours, so I went in screaming to my younger brother. I told him about it and we both went to the kitchen to grab some kitchen knives. We both waited in the bathroom ready to kill until our parents got home. I didn't want to get in trouble, so I decided not to tell them about the whole thing, and I made my brother promise not to either. I figured that guy had probably forgotten about me at this point. Oh, how wrong I was. About a week later, my brother and I were playing extreme frisbee in the front of the yard. I needed another water bottle, so we took a quick time out. I went in to grab the bottles while my brother stayed outside. When I got back outside, I saw a large black van speeding away. I could hear screaming coming from inside. I called my parents and then the police and told them what had happened. There was a big to-do about it, and there was even an article about it in our local newspaper. I knew what happened to me on the deep web had something to do with the kidnapping, but I didn't tell my parents or the police about it. I have never forgiven myself for doing that, because I know it may have been the tiny difference that could have saved my brother's life. If you're reading this, Jonathan, I'm so sorry. Though the deep web has some good uses, it also has an incredibly dark side to it. The dark web is a small corner of the deep web, containing the stereotypical content, bulk drugs, child porn, etc., that the deep web is notorious for. I took my first steps into the little excavation of mine into the darkest parts of anonymous sites under the surface of web browsing, in an attempt to undermine the stereotype that the deep web is more a home to dark, illegal websites than anything good. Well, I came out of this with more than I could have ever expected, and now my view on humanity in general has forever been changed. It took me quite a while, 3 to 4 weeks, to get enough information to start really delving deep into what I will now refer to as the dark web. The small corner of the deep web that is basically the house of horrors. Lots of talking around, honing information from chat rooms, and taking lots of notes. Even had to make a couple of phone calls to some more than shady individuals. Not a comfortable experience. By the end of my trek of gathering as much information possible at the time and getting a good contact list, I took my first steps into the outer layer of the dark web, so to speak. The hard part is that once you get deeper, a lot of sites have ever-changing URLs, extensive invitation queues, and at times, pricey entrance costs that may or may not end up as cash spent on a phony operation. A lot of it is luck, meeting people at the right time and place, and taking good notes. I had a good streak of luck and took good notes, enough to get me to the places I entered. But what I did notice is that once I got into the first site that I will next talk about, it became much easier to get into other sites, as it was much more freely talked about and information was passed around much more. Chat rooms in the dark web equal information honeyhole. First site? Centrix. I knew I had broken the barrier when I got into Centrix. A good example to compare it to would be Agorapha or Silk Road. Now Centrix, from what I hoarded via lots of questions on the chat room over the course of a couple days, has been around for about 11 months and has been untouched by any means of being shut down, which surprises me, because it has everything from Agorapha or Silk Road, but to a much greater extent and a lot more variety. What some sites dedicate their whole selling product to be, Centrix had subcategories for. Just a brief few examples: snuff films, bulk drugs, all varieties, fake everything, IDs, licenses, you name it, a very censored section of CP, various illegally obtained memberships, Netflix, porn, etc. The list goes on. Another thing that is a bit chilling is the fact they took a great effort to crack down on scams. The big deal on sites like Agorapha or Silk Road is that they have a lot of scam vendors. This site didn't, and they had a lot of proof to back it up that I will not go into detail on. I also met a guy in a chat room that was nice. As far as that goes, for an active dark web user like himself, who verified hashed some of the links I had collected and vaguely sent me in the direction of other sites for my personal use. This was a great help and led me to my next site, which from the illegality and general morale of the site is what I consider the next layer or gate into the dark zone. Second site, Brink Warehouse.otc. Yay, a site with a normalish name. Brink Warehouse was actually quite fascinating. Not horrific to an extent, but had a different kind of dark backlash. Brink Warehouse, a virtual warehouse of textual guides, notes, leaked documents, torrented books. Now, at a summary, this might seem alright, but take into account that the guides include things like how to make a drone-based homemade explosive and how to kidnap adolescents in their sleep. Illegal leaked documents galore, anywhere from US classified cases to foreign affairs. Also included guides on illegally modifying weapons, joining terrorist groups, guides to scripting and nulling bank accounts, so on and so forth. Not a fun site. The next site I headed to is where it starts to get formally creepy. The site with no name I got access to, which I consider to be the start of the darkest of the dark web. From Francis Turn 344, who was in the chat room on shit.chat, a very common deep web chat room site that most of you probably already have stopped in on. Well, talk comes to talk, and we end up on the topic of snuff films. How common they are, where they are usually filmed, and why. I get his trust. We resume this chat in a private room that he had, and keep in mind that only getting information was my main reason for chatting. I'm not into snuff films, though they do fascinate me. We talked for a good 20 minutes before, without me having to ask, hooked me up with the site. We are just going to use a tidbit of the site's all-number URL to name it, so 5611 it is. Now the site required an invite, extensive registration, questioning, and a one-on-one meeting with what I assumed was a site director or admin. She was one harsh motherfucker, and the stern punishments for breaking the site's rules was laid out. The guy who invited me, Francis Stern 344, I guess was a longtime user on 5611, who had permission to let me take a tour of the site now. Now, I did ask for a formal site name for future reference, and he said that the site had no name, and that it was purely based to display its content and moderate membership. The title, he said, would only make it easier to identify, which they did not want to happen. 5611 had a small membership that, he said, the runners of the site tried to cater to very fondly, as membership is 1.588 bitcoins monthly, approximately $355 US. Upon entering the site, I had to check the "Are you older than 18" box for the 5th time since I started getting signed up. Finally, I was in. The site's design was bland and blocky, with a pure white background and very blocky, close together writing. In the top right corner, there were the options to log out, add funds to my balance, and then a small wallet emoticon that displayed an empty Bitcoin client-side balance. But that was barely on my mind. My mind was on the center of the screen, in a single row down the center of the screen. Single frames with captions and its description took up most of the screen. The top one had a still of a table with various blades and blunt weapons laid out. The title, 24-year-old female, sleeping, suggested death. With a 2.25 Bitcoin price tag along the side, a timer in green text was counting down. 11:51, 11:50. Under the timer, in the same green font, was 78 over 100. A couple seconds later, the 78 turned into a 79. Realization hit me in the face like a bat. This was a paid snuff site. With a shaky hand, I scrolled down through the seemingly endless snapshots and captions. One caught my eye. Quick watch. Homeless. 0.22 bitcoins. Large view. Low queue. It was like an attention whoring YouTube title, but it seemed to be working. In the eerie green font, 783 over 1,000 displayed, a jaw-dropping number in my eyes. I decided this needed to be documented, so I did a quick transaction, put my 0.3 bitcoins in my site wallet, and clicked on the arrow to enter. It took a minute or two to complete the transaction, and after about a 5-minute buffer, I was in the showing. There was no chat box, only a slightly lighter border of gray and static. The same green timer was now in the bottom right of the screen, the square blurred, revealing a city street. What seemed to be Arabic writing was on various shop signs and advertisements. Light from a street post gave a fuzzy glow to the scene. The cameraman, from the position of the camera, seemed to be leaning against a wall. The shot focused on a dinky red junker on the street's curb. From the side of the camera's view, a gloved finger points towards the entrance of a dark alley, where a man lays on his side, like a breathing pile of rags, obviously homeless and alone. The finger makes a motion towards the car, and 3 men quietly exit the car and walk along the storefronts towards the sleeping homeless figure. Quality is total shit, but the scene can still be made out, and is enhanced by the horrid imagination about what is to come. About 5 meters from the homeless victim, the lanky group of thugs pull out plain white theater masks from their jackets and take out various small weapons and pounce around the corner onto the innocent, unsuspecting victim. The camera picks up the quick shuffling of feet as the cameraman runs towards the scene, catching the thugs thrashing and stomping the man from his slumber. "Cut him up! Cut him up!" The cameraman's thickly accented voice commands the thugs, who begin to slash the victim at a wild speed, like hyenas tearing into a caught prey. Blood sprays onto the wall and onto the thugs' white masks. It is horrible. My stomach barely holds on. I can't take it. Logging off Tor, I take a few more security measures and shut off my computer. Taking some deep breaths and sipping from a Coors Light, my last visit on the dark web, Candy Palace. I logged on about a week later and never thought to go back on 5611. I never contacted anyone from my past sites, and I knew in my heart that this would be my last visit to any site on the deep web. I was thoroughly encouraged not to go on, because with 5611, it had really been in my mind that last straw. I had really proven to myself that the dark web, even though it has some good parts, is really just a beacon of humanity's horrific actions. I had proven to myself that sites like 5611 and the other sites exist, but I just felt the need to cover the last huge part of the dark web that is in my mind the worst of it all: child pornography. Candy Palace is a huge site. Do some digging and get some sources. You will find it. From the videos, I have come to the conclusion that it's all hosted in one location in a foreign country. I always wondered that if there are all these snuff films and child sex slave dungeons that are often spoken about, that there would have to be a suitable amount of missing children cases and unsolved murder cases going along with them. Some research and asking around concluded that many of the filmed murders and child porn directors' rings are in fact in foreign countries, where getting away with these kinds of actions is a piece of cake, in the words of an aspiring director in Candy Palace chat room. I will not go into specific detail about any one video on Candy Palace. I'll only lay out some basic stats and descriptions and let you find the rest if you so please. The main chat room had several hundred chatters in total between the various subchats. They actually had a very detailed profile of each child. An example was Tatajia, 9 years old, black hair, and then included a list of, if I remember correctly, 83 videos she starred in, and counting. The children were usually smothered in makeup, and besides for what seemed like designated 2 to 3 stars, not extremely physically hurt via evident beatings. Double penetration, binding, gay, force, one-on-one, knife, roleplay, chamber, and dungeon were the top video tags. Each video has 1 to 2 tags. If I remember correctly, there were a total of 17 stars. Nobody ever brought up anything about if they were kidnapped, imported, imprisoned. All anybody cared about was watching, so getting information on that topic was hard. Most of the scenes are filmed in various sets. such as era-style dungeons, surgery rooms, etc. No grimy bedrooms or warehouses or basements. Nothing that fits the common stereotype. It was basically Pornhub with a pink, white, black color scheme and 6 to 12-year-olds. It's a nightmare. Conclusion? I never look at people the same. Throughout taking this research-oriented trip through the dark web, my view on humanity has been changed. Every video I watched in the name of research chinked away at my emotions, often left me crying. Curiosity broke me, and it has been nearly a year since I have fully recovered. This is my, case file for my research on the subject. Now, before you launch Tor and find these sites, please know, there is nothing enjoyable, entertaining, or at all suitable content on this network. You will be left in tears, you will be scarred, and worst of all, you will never view others the same again. You lie face down on the ground, your face pressed into the newly manicured spring lawn. You spit, forcing out the few blades of grass which found their way into your mouth in between the small gap of your front teeth. 3 6-foot-tall jocks stand over you kicking and throwing out more insults than an anonymous political activist on Facebook. Blow after blow, your oppressor's attention diverts as a large SUV blasting some incoherent rap music pulls up and honks the horn. After spitting on you and delivering a few final blows, they get in and drive off. After which you get up and brush yourself off. Evil be to him who evil thinks. In short, the proverb means bad things will come to those who think or wish bad things for others. And boy, should there have been something in store for Chad, the leader of your oppressors. As you about face and start walking home, you can't help but notice an old man sitting on a porch a few houses away. His empathic stare tells you that he pities you, but you're really not in the mood to relive the embarrassment which occurred only minutes ago with a complete stranger, and you're sure this old man wants to offer his sympathy. Hell, he may even offer stories of when he was bullied and rose above the situation. You're already late for dinner, which pisses Dad off. The walk home used to be a peaceful time for you, until Chad and a couple of his goons started making it a habit to harass you. Every time you see him now, you press your fingers so hard that you feel as if your palms will be penetrated. He's the kind of guy that gets anything and everything he wants out of life. A girl you could only imagine having. A ruling spot in the social hierarchy of the local high school. And 2 parents with prestigious positions and plenty of wealth. That SUV you saw earlier did belong to him after all. And you couldn't even afford to use your father's car with the price of gas. It dawns on you that one of Chad's friends drove the SUV, but you couldn't bring your inner FBI agent to mentally investigate the situation. When you get home, you move with mere rote, setting the dinner table. Your ears fill with another round of complaints from your father's workday. Funny thing, he works with Chad's dad, who also happens to be his boss. You see how unfulfilled your father is and can tell how envious he is of Chad's father's position. Dad always wanted to be the boss. He even had a chance at it, until Mom passed away. Things got really hard for you and him after that. Chad's father is your father's superior, and Chad can fuck with you as much as his heart desires. You know Dad has a hard time at work, and trouble with the boss's son could have severe consequences, so you suffer in silence. But no one knows just how much you're hurting. Every night before you go to sleep you ask yourself, why you, of all people, had to be placed in such a poor predicament. The next day, after sitting in a cold hard chair that made your ass number than any amount of opiate ever could, and staring at the long hand of a clock move slower than a union worker, you got the hell out of English class. Disappointment fills you when you see your recent test score of 63%. But you're happy to be the hell out of there nonetheless. Chad makes sure to rub in his near perfect score and remind you that one day he'll be your boss, just like his father and your father. You had grown accustomed to the constant insults and put-downs at this point and don't even acknowledge his snarky little comment. To a degree, you know he's right. Between your self-defeated father and lack of your own confidence, you gave up on stopping him and just did your best to avoid him. You barely make it a block from the school when they attack you again. Frustration and shame fill your pores when they open your book bag and throw the contents into a muddy puddle. So much for doing that extra credit for English, you think, and keep your head covered throughout the rest of the beating. On the walk home, you see the old man from the previous night. You really don't recognize him aside from yesterday, which is pretty weird, considering you've been walking this way to and from school every day since you could remember. The house was never for sale, you think to yourself. He shoots you an inquisitive look, and you get a weird feeling from him. Just something about him was different. You feel compelled to ask the man why he was staring at you so intently, so you naturally walk over. It isn't until you are only a few feet away you realize something odd about him. He has the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye. You feel your blood run cold and your senses heighten.
I saw you with your friends last night.
Those guys are anything but my friends.
No point in being a king without peasants to torment.
But why do people like me have to suffer at their expense? I never did anything wrong. I mean, why can't those bastards find some other way to inflate their ego that doesn't involve whipping my ass every day? He takes a step closer towards you and brings his face closer. With his one eye gazing directly into yours, he says,
"Come back tomorrow, and I will have the solution to your problem."
This really just pisses you off even more. A solution to my problem, you say? My dad is a loser. My loving mother has been dead half a decade. I get pummeled to shit nearly every day, and some old man who probably doesn't even live in this house has all the answers. Is that right? He gives you a sedated stare, and you can't tell why, but it actually convinces you he has something up his sleeve. Without uttering another word, you turn around and walk back home to hear more unenthusiastic bitching about the monotony of the office. As you lay in your bed, you wonder what the old man might have in store for you. The thought of him handing you a gun and telling you to shoot your enemies down ran through your head. But that was no solution to your problem. The problems in your life couldn't be fixed with a couple of bullets. After the last bell rang, you follow the rest of the sheep to the exit of the school and begin your stroll to the house in solitude. You're happy to find the ogreish gimps have something better to do with their time today. When you enter the house, your eyes fixate on the eye of the man. Well, what's your solution?
I can tell you have become emotionally numb in many ways. You don't connect with other people like you were once able to.
What the hell does that have to do with any of this?
What if on top of giving you your life back, I could also make you truly feel again?
You're a generally skeptical person, but something about the man seems like he was genuine. You're unable to explain the feeling, but you know he's not just an ordinary old man. That would be nice, you say. The old man points out his index finger and sticks it right into your chest. You gaze at him with uncertainty, but hope whatever bullshit he tries works. 3 seconds go by, and you start feeling an unbearable pain in your chest. The pain envelops you as everything slowly turns to black. When you get home that night, you can't help but to sympathize with your father about his day. It just feels like a whole different experience to you now. More than a week goes by, and you start doubting the old man, until you get home to hear your father's good for a change news. Apparently, Chad's father made a complete ass of himself somewhere gambling, and ended up being talked about in a story on the news. He was fired from his job, and your dad was happy to take the promotion. He secretly despised that man all these years, and to finally step up was a big thing for him. The idea of the old man having anything to do with this crosses your mind, but you chalk it up to be no more than a coincidence. But when news got to you that Chad dropped out of high school, you're convinced. Initially, it's great. You finally feel like you could live your life without someone attempting to shit on it. That isn't even the best part. Angela Pemberton started hinting that she likes you. You! Of all people in the entire school, she was best friends with Chad's girlfriend, and you always dreamt of being with her. You never thought in a million years that your most sacred sexual fantasy would come true. Not soon after, you find yourself on a double date with Angela, Jake, and Emma, the most popular couple in the entire school. You secretly told yourself that these would be the kind of full of themselves degenerates you would never intermingle with, but you don't feel the resentment anymore. It's been replaced with aloofness. It was like you can be your dopey self, and they loved you for it. Yo, Jake, pass the popcorn, my man. Sure thing, playa. Emma asks Angela if she'd accompany her to the bathroom. Angela turns around as they scurry off. She gives you a flirtatious look, one that makes you realize just how lucky a guy you were. Jake leans inward toward you to whisper something. Emma told me that Angela really wants you tonight. You are so in there, man. You blush and shake your head in disbelief. Jake went on. I'm serious, bro. According to Emma, Angela wants you to be her first time. I thought she already lost her V-card a long time ago. Nah, man, that's just people talking about something they don't know anything about. I have been her friend a long time, and she has barely so much as kissed anyone. You're sure he can read the excitement on your face. The girls return from the bathroom. The rest of the night is smoother sailing than a newspaper boat in a kiddie pool. Everyone says their goodbyes and departs. You and Angela hold hands on the way back to your vehicle. You hold open the door like the chivalrous gentleman you are. She giggles in response. You walk behind the car and do an embarrassing hope she didn't see that dance out of excitement. Holding her hand in yours, your heart jumps and you bring the car to an abrupt stop. You see Chad, half naked, walking in the middle of the street, obviously pretty far gone. He turns around and meets your gaze. An odd feeling of guilt washes over you. Here he is in the middle of the street at whatever godforsaken hour of the night, and you just couldn't shake the feeling that you were responsible. The old man kept his word. When you get home, Angela insists on staying the night. The first time you will ever make love in your life, and you spend the entire time thinking about the overwhelming feeling of guilt that's building inside of you. You didn't want to see Chad and his father suffer. They may have been asshats of human beings, but they don't deserve the extremely unfortunate hand they were dealt. As soon as Angela falls asleep, you tiptoe out the room and start the car. You need to find the old man. It takes you about the same amount of time to get to the house as it did to finish with Angela, so it was a pretty quick ride. You rush in and slam your arms on the door. The door startles you when it crashes inward and bangs into the floor, which makes a noise that probably interrupts the neighbor's sleep. There is no one to be found. You search the premise up and down so thoroughly J. Edgar Hoover himself would have been proud. But there is nothing here to suggest anyone lived there in over a decade. You think back to your experiences with the old man over the past few weeks. Can you even trust your own memories? How can you live with yourself knowing that you could be responsible for ruining the life of another? Dear friends, family, and community, I knew I shouldn't have come back to my hometown. This small, secluded place stuck in the hills of the Appalachia, where I know everyone, just wasn't the right place to start my business. I'm sorry, Nadine. Love, Amelia Brown. That's the note she left us, and that was the end of Amelia Laura Brown. We closed down the morgue, her morgue, and gave away her things. She was so proud of her business. Throughout town, they said she did the best work from Boone County to Nashville. The only strange part was that she always dressed her patients, as she used to call them, entirely in white. No colors sprawled over the icy corpse, no flashy makeup, a little red lipstick for the women, and a red nose for the men. She was too young to die, too young to be in this business. Our parents told her that being a mortician was not a profession for a young lady, but her fascination with the dead overruled their complaints. She went on to mortuary school and then came back home to start a business. When asked, all she could say was, "I don't think I fit in anywhere else," which was saying a lot because she could hardly fit in anywhere. There was no niche in any part of school she could slide into. I guess not even when she went off to college and then to mortuary school, where tons of people fascinated with the dead flock. At least, I think that's why people go to mortuary school. I've never been too curious about the outside world though. I haven't been out of Bryson City since I was a baby, and I never even finished high school. What do I need to know about the world? But Amelia had a passionate love for biology, always wanting to find out how humans worked and how we were born, and later on how we died. Maybe it was fate that she became so infatuated with life. Maybe it was fate that led her back home. Maybe it was fate that killed Nadine Wiggins in that car crash. I've always been a firm believer in God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. I go by the Bible. I pray every night and before my meals. I go to church every Sunday. All my babies are Christian. It's almost like Amelia and I were opposites in every way. And I may believe that statement, but damn, she was still my sister. And I still cared a whole lot about her. I know she felt the same way about me. I prayed for her soul every day, hoping she would turn around and see the beautiful light of Jesus Christ shining on her, and be entered by the Holy Spirit, and shout to the heavens for joy. I guess that some people are just not meant for God. My husband says they're wrapped in sin, but I knew enough about Amelia to see that there was no devil in her mind, just a loud machine full of gears, like a clock, always ticking, ringing, wiring, on and on and on. No wonder she snaps. But last year during November, when we give thanks that Amelia had the chance to be on this earth for a while and change our lives, we decided to visit Amelia's old home. A couple of my cousins had moved in, but they didn't mind us, and we ate and drank and laughed. The kids ran around in the yard and built a bonfire, and we all sat around telling stories. I had heard a crash upstairs and yelling, and I figured the kids were roughhousing again, so I went to check on them. I came in and fixed a few scratches, then booted them out the door. The problem was the broken bed. I didn't want my cousins to know the kids broke their bed, so I tried to fix it myself. I lifted up the top end that had fallen, but it was too heavy, so I let it go. It landed with a big thump, and then I heard a softer thump as something fell from the end of the bed. I looked under to see a book lying on the floor and picked it up. It was titled Agony in Black and had a screaming girl with red eyes and inverted black and white on the cover. I was drunk, so I got pretty scared. I stuffed it inside my coat so the kids wouldn't get a hold of it. It was probably my cousin Frank's. I thought he always liked to read comics. Propping up the bed on a stool, I found I started to feel dizzy, so I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. Next thing I knew, I woke up to the chirping of the birds, but the house was silent. I sat up and looked out the window to see the smoldering ashes of the fire, and then I started to hear faint snoring from some of the other rooms. I stood up, but as I did, something fell out of my jacket. I looked down to see a white piece of paper and I picked it up. Realizing it was the comic book with the screaming girl, I turned it over and looked at it again. It was in a plastic taped slip, and the white piece of paper covered up the back. Looking under the bed again, wondering where the hell this thing came from, I saw the tip of something sticking out of the hole in the mattress. I got underneath the bed and grabbed whatever the tip was and pulled it out. Sliding out from under my bed with my prize, I sat down again and looked at what I snagged. It was titled in red letters, Serenity White, and had a black and white photo of someone sleeping with red lipstick on. It was a book bound with twine, and the pages were yellowed and had some holes in them. In the upper corner, someone had written in the red pen, "Property of Amelia Brown." I remember saying aloud, "Oh my God," and then realizing that my cousins had kept all of Amelia's furniture in the house. Looking up, I saw that the sun wasn't up yet, so everybody would take a while to wake up. I set down Serenity White, took Agony in Black, and out of its cover, it was full of stories. Horror stories, I guess, and some weird vampire ads. This was apparently Amelia's, and she had circled a mailing address to buy a book titled Poems for the Dead. The strange thing was that Amelia had never been into comics. She preferred books over what she used to call cheap thrill rubbish. I guess this one had caught her attention though. Flipping through it, I read that it had been published in the fall of 1997. I skimmed a couple of pages, but there was nothing else circled or underlined or marked in any way. I put it back in its cover and turned to Serenity White. Obviously she had chosen to mimic Agony in Black with the title and cover. I opened it up to the first page, and as I read, I realized it was Amelia's diary. Nobody had found it for 16 years. My shit for brains cousin hadn't even bothered to get rid of her stuff. The first date was June 7th, 1993.
June 7th, 1993. I finally finished school, and now I'm back home. My parents are begrudgingly proud of me, and I told them of my plans to open a morgue.
I skipped a few entries and got to the grand opening of the Brown Morgue.
March 19th, 1994. I've done it. I have successfully started my own business. We had a party after I announced it was open, but soon I'll have to start working. I already had a call from Mr. Waldrop that Mrs. Waldrop is dying, and he needs my services. I feel so sorry for both of them, but I am so excited for my first patient. She'll be beautiful.
Amelia's Morgue, being the only facility of its kind for another 20 miles, became the town's main spot for their dead to be handled. Amelia was so tender with her patients and always helped the loved ones get through their losses. But by now, I knew what I was looking for, and soon enough, I found it.
October 18, 1997. I can't bear to think of it, let alone write it down, yet I must do both. My friend, my only friend, Nadine Wiggins, has perished. Her family called me yesterday in tears, telling me that she had been drunk and died in a car crash. A collision is what killed her. They say they know that I'll take the best care of her body, and they want me to be her mortician. October 19th, 1997. Oh, if only it were that simple. If I could just detach my mind from her body, from her being, then I could face what lies in the basement. She'd been down there for one day, and I can't sleep at all tonight. I have to start my work tomorrow, and I tell myself that soon it'll all be over.
I had no idea what happened next. I knew she was depressed after Nadine died and had taken to drinking, but I never had a clue of how far her depression went, how far it stretched until it led into madness.
October 20th, 1997. I sit with her body tonight. I lifted up her body and held her, though no tears came. Music swelled in my heart, and we danced. And we were once more together, the dead and the living waltzing to a song only I can hear. She is in her white dress, with her beautiful red lipstick on, and I am not ashamed to admit that I let that rose-colored mine own lips. I imagine us dancing through the graveyard, both of us dead, colder than the night air, skin as pale as moonlight, skipping from gravestone to gravestone. Our eyes stare into hell, but no regrets lie behind them, only love. Love as pure as dew, silencing grass over graves. How I wish I could bring you back, Nadine. October 21st, 1997. When I am buried, I cannot dance with Nadine, for my body will be old and decrepit. She will be dust. Maggots will have eaten out her own eyes, those beautiful brown eyes, and her tongue, and all the soft parts, and I will have turned to dust much sooner as an old woman. But maybe we can dance. Maybe there is a way. October 22nd, 1997. I have worked on so many familiar faces. I wonder if it is worth it to come back home. Gregory Myers, Jessica Dyer, Frederick Wilson, and so many more, all gone. So many of my schoolmates have passed away, friendly faces are dead. And I start to picture everyone with pale skin, those eyes searching for life, the limp body. Whenever someone dresses in white, I shudder. Red lipstick and red roses are no longer beautiful. They only symbolize the end. October 24th, 1997. I've always known that everyone will die one day. It is why I am so fascinated with death. How could one person filled with so much energy and thought and feelings simply collapse and mean nothing more? I try to bring out their beauty, show their passions, and make known their names. I want to make the memory of them last for as long as it can. That is why I am a mortician. This is my destiny. Nadine still sits in my basement. She waits for her funeral. October 27th, 1997. I attend Nadine's viewing and funeral today, and everyone has told me she looked beautiful. I hid her behind layers of white, and her red lipstick sat dully on her lips. What an ugly specimen, the worst I have ever done. Her family cannot see beyond what covers her. They cannot see Nadine for who she was. They only see my beauty. I am so selfish. My destiny is not to make beautiful your loved ones for rotting. It is to show my skills as an artist using a body.
I skipped ahead to a couple days before November 4th, 1998.
October 31st, 1998. I wrap my hands around my throat and hope to a God that I don't believe in that this will be easier than I think. I've seen so many deaths, and I don't know the best way to die. They're all so messy. Oh God, why do I even bother? I have to keep my family proud of me. I visited the road to nowhere today, and I listened to the wind tell me I was going to die. It smelled like horse shit, and the graffiti on the walls was obscene. Life is so ugly. I've never been a very happy person, even as a child. Why wouldn't I kill myself? I've seen enough sadness to pass a lifetime. What's left for me now? An empty home and heart? I remember when cousin Carl took me up to a tunnel and raped me till the floor was slick with blood. I remember members of the Ku Klux Klan following me home from school because I did not believe in God. All I know is horror, and all I know is despair. That is all my empty life. I am a walking tragedy. I visited Nadine's grave as well. There was some sort of dead flowers on it. November 1st, 1998. Nadine has been heavy on my mind this last year. The day she died was last month, the anniversary of her death, you could say. I don't eat anymore. I don't go out. I attend my patients, and sometimes, with the aching in my heart that Nadine has left, I dance with them. The men in their white suits prick my fingers with their roses, and the blood drips down my arm. The women in their white dresses paint my lips as red as my blood. But the children, I save the special dances for. We hop and skip, and I twirl the small girls around. They are all so perfect, so beautiful. I truly am an artist for the dead. November 2nd, 1998. My sister came by today. I told her I wanted to see her. This was my last goodbye to her. She has always been there for me, even though we were so different. She noticed my pricked fingers, and I told her that it was from picking out all of the roses. She asked who my latest work was on, and I told her it was Little Charlotte May. She said, "Oh, I remember how that girl loved to dance." What I didn't tell her was that she still does. November 3rd, 1998. Tomorrow is the big day. I've called up Mother and Father, and Charlotte May has been buried. Everything is neat and tidy in the house. I hung my rope from the top of the staircase. As long as I don't receive any visitors, I will be fine. November 4th, 1998. Goodbye.
And there it ended. The sun was only barely over the mountains. I prayed that Amelia was right and there was no heaven or hell. Tucked the 2 books into my jacket, and then woke up my husband and the kids went home. That night, after everyone had fallen asleep, I drove out to the cemetery beside the school and looked at Amelia's grave. The flowers we had put down yesterday were wilted and lay strewn across the ground. I looked around for Nadine's grave and found it covered in live wildflowers. I looked at the moon, and behind me, I heard the soft steps of the dead as they danced through the grass, their skin as pale as moonlight, their eyes searching a hell they didn't believe in, their howls of victory ringing through the night air warmer than their blood. This has been a strange and confusing path. I never intended on becoming a serial killer or harming people. I was a social reject for many years. I was picked on in high school and often ate lunch alone, sometimes even having to eat in the bathroom. I wasn't so much bullied as I was just flat out rejected. I saw the pretty girls in my school, and I always longed to have a girlfriend of my own. Someone to hold and love like nobody else ever could. But that was never possible with my current social standing throughout high school, or even into my college years. My mother, who raised me alone, was never able to afford a cell phone for me. But when I got into college, I worked at a local McDonald's, and we were able to each get a phone. With some luck, we were both able to get iPhones for a relatively low cost. We didn't get too much data usage with our plan, but we were happy nonetheless. I downloaded a bunch of free games, avoiding the social media apps. I'm sure you can imagine why. About a month went by, attending classes in hopes of becoming a writer someday. I made sure to help out my mom wherever I could, and I did my best at my extremely remedial job. I was content with my life for the time being, but months passed, and life became monotonous yet again. I found myself laying alone at night, imagining what it would be like to feel the warm embrace of a woman. I downloaded a few dating apps online. I got one that forced you to pay for a subscription to message people. I deleted it once the realization hit me. I got another and there was not one woman who messaged me back. I couldn't figure out why though. My profile picture was nice looking and there was nothing weird about the profile I created in general. I found myself at a loss when I realized that none of the women on that app wanted anything to do with me. I was searching through the app store when I came across it. Tinder. I loved it the second I downloaded it. I didn't bother to swipe any girls to the left. I liked all of them just to up my chances of being matched. I was matched with 4 women within the first week, but unfortunately, none of them responded to the messages I sent them. But finally, on the 5th match, I got a reply to my charming compliment. We hit it off rather quickly. We exchanged numbers and she told me she had just broken up with her boyfriend a few days prior and was looking for new guys to talk to. I know this wasn't exactly the ideal relationship I was going for, but I was beyond desperation at this point. We spoke for 2 weeks before arranging a face-to-face meet. I sat in the coffee shop feeling a bit anxious as I received a notification from my phone. It was her. She couldn't make it, but asked if we could meet another time. I agreed and headed home with disappointment. After that day, she started acting differently. When the only way you communicate with someone is through text messaging, you learn their tendencies, how long it takes to reply, use of emojis, and unnecessary capitalization. It was taking her longer to text back, and her replies were shorter and shorter by the day. It got to the point that she was sending me one-word replies every other message. She was like that for 3 whole days, and on the 4th day, stopped texting me altogether. I couldn't figure out why, and I asked her if I'd done something wrong. By this point, I felt a real connection with this girl, and I'd even gone as far to tell my mom about it. When I received a text message from her that she'd gotten back together with her old boyfriend, I felt the world around me come crashing down. I finally had someone to be mine and she was stolen from me. A few days passed and I just laid in my bed, feeling sorry for myself. I couldn't bring myself to leave my room to a world that didn't care for me. A world that left me to my own without giving a second thought to my well-being. A week had gone by when I texted her again to see if she'd broken up with him again. I felt the blood in my face boil when I received a picture message of her and her boyfriend flipping off the camera. A text message followed shortly after telling me the size of my penis would never be enough to satisfy her. I'd never felt so hurt and betrayed in my life. It was one thing to use me until something better came along, but now she was intentionally setting out to hurt me. I wanted nothing more than to kill the both of them, but I wasn't sure if I'd be able to do it. Maybe if I just saw her face to face, we would be able to work it out. I know this will sound weird, but I still loved her. I did some detective work and figured out her address from her Facebook account, and headed there the following Saturday. I was greeted by the beautiful blonde, still wearing her pajama pants. The look of shock on her face told me that I was the last person she'd expected. I told her that I loved her, and we should be together. She laughed and slammed the door in my face. I couldn't even describe how hurt I felt at that point. I was humiliated and rejected, and I'd had enough. Rage rushed through me and I blacked out. When I came to, I was standing over the corpse of a blonde 20-year-old with blood everywhere. I almost puked when I realized what had happened. I just murdered a woman in cold blood, and I was going to spend the rest of my life behind bars if I didn't do something quick. I raced upstairs to what I assumed to be her room. I grabbed her phone and deleted all my contact information. I must have gotten lucky because nobody was around when I sprinted back to my car and sped off. I did my best to take my mind off the intensely grotesque situation by going back on Tinder. I swiped until I ran out of likes and then headed off to bed. The next day I awoke. I had been matched with a girl who seemed interested. I simply couldn't help myself when I messaged her. After I got her number, we spoke about our previous relationships. I told her I would just be heartbroken if my last relationship were to repeat itself. Every child's fear. You remember the feeling, don't you? The feeling that you're being watched. That if you make the slightest movement, you're dead. Everybody had that fear as a child. You wake up in the night, can't get back to sleep, shuffling back and forth from one uncomfortable position to the next, hoping to find a way to sudden slumber. You give up. There's no way you are going back to sleep anytime soon, so you simply turn to your side and stare out the window. The road, the lights, the trees, all seem so strange under the cover of night. You try to keep your mind quiet of any distractions, remembering that you still need to sleep. And that's when the feeling hits you. The feeling swarms over you like an ice-cold blanket that has just been spread across your back. You remember that it's night, and that night is when fear likes to hunt. You feel almost as if you are being watched from behind. You can't see it, but its eyes are trained on you. You want to move, but you can't. If you do, something bad, no, something horribly wrong is going to happen to you. The only thing you can do is remain quiet and still, and hopefully it won't notice you. As you lie in your bed, frozen in fear, if only you could quickly grab your bed sheets and throw them over yourself to hide your body from whatever evil monstrosity stands behind you. It could be done. Perhaps. If you're fast and precise, you could succeed. You decide to think no longer. You flip yourself over and grab your bed sheets with both hands. Without looking around the room, you swipe back down, covering yourself with a thick blanket. Safety. It is then that your mind comes back to you, and you remind yourself that there is nothing there. Darkness clouds the mind, and it causes it to hallucinate. With the only limitations being your imagination, you slowly poke your head out of the sheets and scan your eyes around the room. Nothing. You place your head back on the pillow and slowly drift off to sleep. This is every child's fear, and parents always tell their children to go back to sleep, and that it's good for them to work through their fears. They're wrong, because what they don't know is that when the children hide under their bed sheets, the real fear is not what is standing over them, but what is staring at them from under the covers. Our story starts in the material plane far away from Galarian's solar system. This is where the giant monstrous mosquito Glonder, or as his devout call him, the Gossamer King, whom some say grew out of the corpse of a dead god, found a new home hidden from Desna on a planet called Thoria, where he would feed on the heartblood of his faith's truly devout. Now Desna, an ancient goddess of freedom of luck, whom legends claim accidentally freed Glonder from his cocoon, was searching across the plains for him to fix her mistake. Desna found Glonder on Desna found Glaunder on the planet Thoria on the material plane and tried to reason with him to turn from his evil ways so that she would not have to send him back to his cocoon of jail, or worse, destroy him. When Glaunder would not agree with Desna's terms, he tried to flee from her, but Desna caught him and attempted to entrap him back in his cocoon, but failed. So instead, she trapped him inside the icebound caves in the frozen heart of Thoria. With Glaunder temporarily trapped in the icebound caves on the planet Thoria, Desna traveled to the outer sphere to seek guidance and wisdom from the Netis, the god who holds magic above all things. Desna asked Nethys to remove all planet travel to and from Thoria by placing an anti-planet shield around the planet. Nethys agreed, but to cast a spell around Thoria to stop all planar travel, he would need specific components, so he made 19 magical crystals of small, medium, and larger sizes. Nethys gave the crystals to Desna and asked her to travel to each of the 19 planets and collect some of the planes planar essence into the crystal. Desna had collected 18 out of the 19 crystals she had on plane left to visit the Abyss. The Abyss surrounds the outer sphere like the impossibly deep skin of an onion. The layered plane of the Abyss begins as gargantuan canyons and yawning chasms in the fabric of the outer planes, bordered by the foul waters of the river Styx, coterminous with all of the outer planets. The infinite layers of the Abyss connect to one another in constantly shifting pathways. There are no rules in the Abyss, nor laws, order, or hope. The Abyss is a perversion of freedom, a nightmare realm of unmitigated horror where desire and suffering are given demonic form. For the Abyss is the spawning ground of the innumerable races of demons, among the oldest beings in all of the great beyond. Once Desna reached the Abyss, she collected the essence and was about to leave when she noticed Pazuzu approaching her. But before Pazuzu could get to her, Desna surrounded the crystal in a magical spell and hid it in one of the many canyons. Pazuzu, the self-proclaimed king of wind demons and patron of all that is evil and flies, was drawn to the essence-filled crystal and felt its great magical power. He captured Desna, tortured and held her prisoner, claiming that the essence stone was stolen from his realm and demanded it back. Desna managed to escape and she quickly fled to the canyons, recovering the crystal and returned to Nethys with the last of the 19 essence crystals. Nethys scattered the 19 crystals throughout Thoria, and with all 19 crystals in Thoria, Nethys placed an anti-planar shield around the planet. No mortal or god would ever be able to enter or exit Thoria for eternity. Party Chasing by Teddy. Halloween is by far my favorite time of the year. The one wonderful day where walking around with a mask on is socially acceptable. Masks hold quite a unique place in society. A mask can transform anyone into something else, turn an actor into a character, hide the secret identity of a superhero, or even allow monsters to walk among men. You never know what's behind a mask until it's taken off, but that's the best part of Halloween. No one is going to take off anyone's mask. There's no gang of teenagers with their talking dog there to strip away my disguise and reveal the truth underneath. No, this is reality, and on Halloween I'm perfectly able to hide in plain sight. Of course, wearing a mask has its own special meaning for me. I'm not an actor, superhero, or even a monster. Not in the fictional terms, at least. No, I simply use a mask as a means of entry. Any mask works, really, so long as it covers my face. I manage to use a different one every year. All I need to do is walk the streets of my suburban neighborhood, weave my way through various decorations, and dodge packs of trick-or-treaters until I hear the familiar blaring of loud music. Like a sailor to a siren at sea, I'm drawn to the music, to the party that it emanates from. Yes, this is why Halloween is wonderful. No one seems to ever ask questions at the door to a Halloween party. All I really need to do is knock and wave when the door opens. The mask makes people just assume I'm there for the party. Hell, sometimes people just leave their front doors wide open, allowing even easier access to their home. On Halloween, no one gives a second glance toward a masked man making his way through their midst, which is what makes my hobby oh so fun. They are completely oblivious as I approach their food. They continue to chatter and gossip as I add my own special ingredient to their bowl of punch. They continue to dance and play as I slab small sharp needles into their chocolates and sweets. It's not until their first friend drops to the floor, either choking on my poison or coughing up bloody needles, that people start to panic. It's the same every year. As soon as I leave the party and hear the chaos rising behind me, an unstoppable grin forms under the mask. Screams of terror are such a pleasant noise for such a pleasant holiday.
Number 1.
I went to buy a Nintendo 64 with a ton of games and a few controllers for a little more than $100. He told me to meet him at Walmart, not far from my school. So I went after the school day. He told me that morning that he had a cherry red Mustang and to meet him at 3 o'clock. I was looking forward to that Nintendo 64 for a long time, as it took me at least a week of searching online to find this deal. It was halfway through the school day when I received a text message from the man who I was supposed to be meeting that day. He said he wouldn't be able to meet me until tonight, and I figured I'd go along with it, so we agreed on meeting at the same place tonight at 7. This was already well into the winter months, so it was already dark by the time I got there. I pulled into the parking lot to see 2 6-foot men standing near the cherry red Mustang. I wasn't entirely sure, but it looked as if one of them was holding a screwdriver or something like that. I saw him scratching up one of the nearby cars for no apparent reason, and I decided I'd better just leave. I blocked the guy's number and reported the incident to the police. Not more than a month later, I read in my local paper about a man who abducted and tortured a high school student to death. I couldn't tell if it was the same man, but the man abducted the victim at Walmart in a cherry red Mustang.
Number 2.
My family had a holiday flat that was at literally 3 minutes away from the beach, and I was walking back from it, alone, in a pink dress with my crazy long hair loose. I'm sure I looked a lot older than I actually was. A guy in sports clothes ran past me and I was very shy, so I didn't look up, and I didn't see what he was doing. But after a few moments, he was back at my side, now walking. He told me some things that I don't remember, and I barely answered. There was a park across the street we were walking on with very tall trees that looked more like a labyrinth than anything else. He took my hand and dragged me in, and we sat on a bench far away and hidden from the curious eyes. He kissed me with his tongue and kept taking my hand to rest it on his penis. It disturbed me a lot. I don't know if it was better or worse than if he had touched me, but anyway, after a moment, he asked me how old I was. Maybe because now he was watching my face instead of my boobs. When I told him I was 14, he seemed a little concerned. So I started talking about my parents a lot, hoping it would disgust him. I don't know if it did, but I told him I had to go or else my parents would get worried and look for me. And I lived just 1 minute away. I think he only let me go because I promised I would come back at the park at 3 o'clock the next day. And I probably looked dumb and naive enough for him to believe it. The thing is, I did come back like I said. Don't ask me why, I'm not really sure. I think I just wanted to teach him he couldn't manipulate innocent girls like that, tell him to go eat shit. So at 3 o'clock I was standing at the edge of the street next to the park, waiting for him to notice me from where he was, certainly inside. Since I was just standing there waiting, people passing by made comments about me being a hooker. It struck me because I really wasn't in the mood of getting trashed, especially not on this subject. It still took me by surprise when I saw a man crossing the road towards me, all in black with a gray cap shadowing his face. I couldn't see if it was the man from the other day, but his walking was quick, straight to me and very determined. So I turned on my heels and headed to my building as fast as I could, while still trying to look like I just hadn't seen him, and was giving up on the rendezvous. I was living on the first floor, so when I reached my door, I turned my head around to see if he had followed, and he did. Just when I watched, he was opening the first door of the building, less than 2 meters from me, head still bowed to hide his face, still moving frighteningly fast, not saying anything. But you needed a code to pass through the second door. I still launched myself inside my flat and locked myself in because I really hadn't expected him to tail me when obviously I was leaving, or to even come inside my fucking building like he intended to follow me all the way to my apartment. I know what you're gonna tell me. I shouldn't have put myself in unnecessary danger and I should have reported him. It just seemed like he simply saw a pretty girl walking down the street and decided to have a little fun before she disappeared. Nothing more. I don't think he will do this kind of thing to another person. If something like this was to happen again, of course I would report it, but I was 14 years old and very shy and oblivious to most things.
Number 3.
When I lived in my parents' old house, my bedroom faced towards our backyard, and underneath my window we had a smaller roof, which represented the portion of my house that led into where our basement was, if that makes sense. Anyway, that smaller roofed area of my house was right next to a fence that separated me and my neighbors' backyards. It was therefore very easy to climb up from the fence onto the smaller roof and then to my bedroom window. My boyfriend at the time would actually do this frequently, usually to kiss me goodnight, and yes, sometimes I snuck him into my room. I was a teenager, what can I say? Anyway, one night I remember I was laying on my bed reading a Lion King sticker book for some reason. My bed was against the same wall that the window was, so I couldn't see anything in the window while I was laying on my bed. My window was open because it was the summer and it was still very hot that night. I can't remember how late it was, but probably around 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Because my dad was asleep. He was a mailman and woke up early. And I remember my mom was taking a bath, so I'm on my bed enjoying this Lion King sticker book immensely when all of a sudden I hear a male voice whisper through the window, "Don't scream." I bolted out of my bedroom and into the bathroom, freaking out my mom, telling her I was not sleeping in my room at all that night. I ended up sleeping in my parents' room and my mom slept in my bed. She even said she felt freaked out sleeping in my bed that night. I've tried to figure out who exactly it could have been. I really don't think it was my boyfriend because he wasn't one to do jokes like that. And even if he did, he would have told me the next day that he did it. I did live near a couple teenage guys, but for the most part, I didn't interact with them, and they also didn't seem like the type that would do something like that. I remember the voice sounding very deep, too. It's one of those things that I'll always remember vividly in my mind when I think about it. For the longest time, I would not sleep with the window open, even if it was really hot out, and back then we didn't have AC, so it really sucked. But I was far too scared. Dead bodies have popped up in hotel beds all over America. Florida, California, Las Vegas, Atlantic City, New Jersey, etc. It seems there isn't a state that's gone without a corpse not checking out. One particularly disturbing case was in 2003, when a guest noticed a foul smell in his room at the Capri Motel, Kansas City, and complained to staff. After 3 nights of opening windows and no doubt of gallons of Febreze, the stench wouldn't leave, causing the poor guest to vomit in the room. When the cleaning crew began shifting furniture to clean the puke, they found the decomposing corpse of a man wearing only a nun's wimple and a fishnet stocking. To repeat, he slept in that bed for 3 nights. On September 12, 2008, 2 trains collided in the Chatsworth district of Los Angeles, killing 25 people in the crash. One of the passengers on board was Charles E. Peck, who was traveling from Salt Lake City for a job interview in Los Angeles. His hopes were high on landing the job as his fiancée, Andrea Katz, lived in California, and he planned to marry her if he was hired. During the next 11 hours, Peck's mobile phone sent numerous calls to his fiancée, son, brother, stepmother, and sister. Overall, his loved ones received a total of 35 calls. However, each time they answered, they only heard static. When they called back, the calls went straight to voicemail. The family could only be optimistic and assume Charles was alive in the wreckage and calling for help. When the search team finally traced Peck's phone signal and discovered his body in a lead passenger car, where most major injuries and deaths occurred, they reported that Charles had died on impact, and that he couldn't have possibly made the calls. What's even more ominous is that they never found the phone. Although not as well known as a man of his accomplishments should be, Gilles de Reyes has gone down in the history books as a close companion of Joan of Arc, a skilled military leader in the French army, and as the Baron de Reyes, born around 1405 and dying on October of 1440. He is also remembered for the murder, torture, and rape of anywhere between 80 and 800 children. He distinguished himself with many fine accomplishments, fitting for a noble of the French aristocracy at a time when France and England were leading the Western world, and fought with reckless bravery on the battlefields of the 100 Years' War between England and France. He fought alongside Joan of Arc and was present when the Siege of Orleans was finally ended. However, after Joan of Arc was burned at the stake and the death of his grandfather, who had tutored him through much of his childhood and led the family, de Reyes withdrew from the military and public life. He built a chapel where he officiated himself, despite not being an ordained priest of any religion, and produced a theatrical spectacular which required 500 extras and 140 main parts, which bankrupted de Reyes. He sold property to support his extravagant lifestyle, and continued to lose land, money, and respect. 600 costumes were once worn for the play, then discarded and built afresh for each performance. Unlimited supplies of food and drink were available for all spectators at the expense of de Reyes. With no avenue of revenue left available to him, he began to dabble in the occult, attempting to summon a demon 3 times and failing 3 times. De Reyes provided a contract that would allow him immense riches in return for whatever the demon asked for. Once the experiments failed, de Reyes was advised that the parts of a child would placate the demon. De Reyes provided these body parts at a future invocation, and still the demon did not appear. De Reyes was an immensely prolific pedophile and murderer. Over decades, he murdered a confirmed 200 children, with an estimate rising as high as 600, including the deaths without bodies as evidence, and up to 800 as the highest estimate. The boys, although girls were common too, would be pampered after being kidnapped, dressed in sumptuary clothing that they would have never before even seen. They would share a large meal, and heavy drinking of fine alcohols, particularly Hippocras, which is a stimulant, Then the boy would be taken to an upper room of the castle, which only Gillis and his cronies could enter. There the boy would be confronted with the true nature of what was about to happen to him, which was reportedly a source of huge pleasure for Derace. He would hang the child from the ceiling with hooks and a rope, and then masturbate upon their stomach and legs. He would then take the child down, comfort them, and assure them that he only wished to play. Then either he or his accomplices would kill the child, either by decapitation, slitting of the throat, dismemberment, or smashing their necks with a stick. Derace kept a particular short sword at hand to use in the murder of the children. At his trial, Derace's assistants and partners in crime confessed that Derace would abuse the children before wounding them, and at other times, after their death. He would not abuse them in the most common way, but preferred to sodomize the children, or use their injuries to pleasure himself. Indeed, in his own confession, Gillis Derace testified that he would kiss the children after they were dead, and hold up the most handsome heads to admire. He would have their bodies cut open and took delight in seeing their organs. He would calmly sit on the stomachs of the dying children and take pleasure in seeing them dying in pain. He would laugh and laugh. The children were mostly burned, leaving very little evidence of the sheer number of victims. Gillis Derace was found guilty after a series of investigations and burnt at the stake, while simultaneously being hanged by the neck until dead. However, his guilt has always been in question, as a series of extremely convenient circumstances arose from his death, such as the judge at his trial receiving all of Derace's lands, titles, and wealth upon his death. However, the evidence for his innocence is extremely limited. There is much more that could be said about the wolf, Gillis Derace.